Okay, sorry, we're back again. Had some stream difficulties. This is not the first time, and it won't be the last. Anyway, so I was asking a question to Majuular. What are your favorite RPGs?
Favorite RPGs. So like making the like meaningful distinction here, because like I mentioned, I kind of like WRPGs are what most of like my adolescence were spent on. Um, the JRPG that kind of bridges the gap for me between like nostalgia and who I am now would be Chrono Cross, I would say, and probably Chrono Trigger. Uh, Maybe to like not, I don't think it's an inferior game at all, but like Chrono Cross had such a like an aesthetic kind of impact on me when I was younger, and it's one of the few examples of a game where I like remembered it very fondly, and I wasn't monumentally disappointed when I revisited that as an adult. And yeah, in general, I mean, I love like CRPGs, like Planescape, um,
Ooh,
System Shock 2, stuff that like gives you some level of agency, I guess, and how you kind of approach the character build and the story. So in that way, I guess it's kind of like diametrically opposed to JRPGs. But I find like different reasons to value both of those.
awesome. Yeah, Planescape Torment is so good, man. I I
Amazing.
I often juggle which of those like uh late 90s, early 2000s advanced D&D games I like the most, and it's either between Planescape and Baldur's Gate 1. It's funny enough.
Oh, interesting. Baldur's Gate 1. That's usually people go straight for the 2. So
2 is better. It's definitely a better game. I just like something about the openness of 1 just like spoke to me, and it was like the first game, or actually first, I guess, introduction to D&D as a concept that I ever
okay.
had. So
No,
it's
I
like
appreciate that.
it's
I kind of
feels
have
based.
in the
Sure.
in the realm of CRPGs. I kind of have a similar take. I'm not really too into CRPGs because they are a lot slower paced, but I do like classic Fallout. Probably because New Vegas is my favorite modern Fallout. I've played through Fallout 1 a few times. I never got far in 2 just because of how punishing that early game is if you're not doing melee weapons. But just looking over the atmosphere and watching playthroughs on YouTube, I definitely prefer Fallout 1 to 2, which is a minority opinion.
I'm with you on that actually. I
I
like
love the
Fallout 1 more.
atmosphere.
I
The atmosphere is great.
Mm.
I love both Fallout 1 and 2 for like very very different reasons, but I think I'll have to be I'll go with the majority opinion and still be the odd one out here. I do like
That's
Fallout
fair.
2 a little bit better.
That's fair. You're allowed to have your wrong opinion. No, I'm just kidding.
No, he's like everyone's
I've made
getting
a
along
brand
too
on my
well.
wrong opinion.
Hell yeah. I mean, you
Fallout
did
video
gas
when?
up. You gassed up Legend of Dragoon. Let me just say that much. So that's the wrongest opinion I think that you might have.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why in what context, but you and like disliking Legend of Dragoon are kind of bouncing around my head. I'm not sure if you've said something
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
or what.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's totally fair. By the way, it's one of those things. That video, going into it, basically, I wanted to like understand why Legend of Dragoon still has this vocal white hot fan base after all these years. Such an obscure game and doesn't particularly like excel in any one way. And I don't know. I feel like I caught a little bit of that like bug. I caught a little bit of what it is that
Mm.
people like find in it, and a lot of it is sort of like secondhand nostalgia. I would say it is heavily nostalgia based, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with like thinking a game is great because it was great when you were a kid or
Yeah.
it reminds you of good times, right?
Really good segue into our topic for this evening, which is how analysis and discourse can affect our perception of things. So, I think that's a really good point. Is that like just because I mean there's always merit in positive critical opinion and negative critical opinion too. If something is so widespread that you can find it everywhere, it's easy to pick things from it, right? And like sometimes you like things just because you like things and you don't have to analyze it, right? Like you just do, man. It's not worth the effort maybe. It's again, it's feels based. So I'm curious about this whole thing. Um, First off, we need to set some, like, I guess, like fundamental understandings of each other and how we get into games. So, do you guys have any? And again, remember specifically related to RPGs because it might be different. Do you have any prescription for how you get into in RPGs, like any prep work, anything like that? Andrew, we'll start with you.
For me, it's setting aside at least a few hours to start an RPG. So, like a few hours to get myself immersed into it and understand how to play it and understand the baseline plot or characters so that I can acquaint myself with it so I can get into a kind of groove. But before that, I do a little bit of research to understand okay, how's the general tone? What kind of game is it? Like, as far as like interaction and gameplay, what is it that people why are people drawn to it at which like yeah that's the whole thing with affecting our perceptions but when there is a near consensus opinion there usually is something a reason why that there is that consensus. And so as I go through the Final Fantasy series, for example, I go in with these consensus opinions in the back of my mind, but if it's a consensus in regards to the gameplay, like I'll talk about this later, but Final Fantasy 2, attack your own party to level up, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
I
like,
knew that
all
was
right,
gonna. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
like, all right, I understand that that's what people say. That is like what a lot of people parrot, but I'm going to go into it trying to engage with the game on its own terms, like just engaging with it organically before I try out some of the conventional wisdom. And even then, I may not stick with the so-called conventional wisdom in a given game. Final Fantasy VIII would be an example of that, I guess.
I knew that FF2 comparison was going to happen, but I think that that's really true, and I think you did a good job of again gassing up my kings. I think you did a good job of sort of divorcing public perception of that game while also acknowledging it, right? Like
In the Final Fantasy II video.
yeah, yeah,
Sure.
because it didn't really, I guess, overtake what you were talking about, but because that's a really hot topic for people who would, anyone, pretty much anyone who's clicking into that video has probably heard some of that juice about FF2 before. Oh, you hit your own party members. Oh, it doesn't make any sense. So they're going into a video about a game that they may have not played, knowing things that they don't know firsthand. So I think it's like it's a good like baseline or backbone to carry through. So yeah, you did a good job, man. Good job.
Yeah, and on that point, I just want to say this real fast. I normally wouldn't talk about that kind of modern perception in the Final Fantasy retrospective videos, but because that particular assumption is so
Yeah.
prevalent with Final Fantasy 2 specifically, I felt like I had to bring it up, acknowledge it, and if necessary, debunk it, as it were, in the main body of the video. So
Yeah, no, that's good. You use an argument just to Tommy gun it full of holes. That's good. Or maybe leave it. There's a lot of is truth to that, to objectivity to some of those criticisms. I think too.
there is some truth to it.
Cool. How about you, Modular? Any kind of like, I say prescription, that sounds like a little pejorative, but like any kind of like standards or things that you have in your mind before you start an RPG or while you start it, rather?
Um, honestly, no, not really. I'm trying to think. Like, I definitely see where you're coming from with that, and actually, that sort of idea of like letting public perception affect like how you think or feel, or like especially how you might want to talk about a game as somebody who makes like essays and stuff. Like maybe you don't agree with like something somebody says, there's kind of a temptation to be like overly apologetic about it, at least for me, because it's just like, oh man, I don't want to like upset people. Sometimes you just gotta lay down the law. um but I actually like I tend to go into these things as blind as I can, and naturally there's like some games where like the popularity is just like been absorbed by like this video game zeitgeist. Like it's hard to go in completely blind and not talking about public perception with like Final Fantasy VII, you're not gonna like escape that there. Um, but yeah, I find a lot of people. When I did the Xenogears video, I got a ton of people recommending to me an amazing channel that did amazing series of videos called Resonant Arc. You guys are probably
Oh
perhaps
yeah,
Yep.
familiar
yeah.
with. And like just like absolutely stellar work there. But like for me, I always say no, I'm not going to watch it until I'm like done my video, because I'm very like I'm very sensitive to other people's thoughts and feelings about stuff like that, and it constantly puts me in a state where I'm second guessing my own thoughts and feelings about something, wondering if perhaps I've sort of like subconsciously absorbed somebody else's ideas about it. So I like to go in basically as sort of cleanly as possible, not really understanding what I'm getting into. Um, I would say on on a basic level, I agree with the idea of like you got to spend sort of a minimum number of hours when you're just playing a game, not necessarily making a video on it. Because RPGs are you need to kind of hold their hand for a little while and get to know them before you start understanding what you're in. But yeah, generally, I wait until I'm done before I start sort of like digging into things or trying to contextualize things, and that way, when I share thoughts with other people, it feels like okay, this is kind of like vindicating in a way. And then when I don't, it's kind of like interesting to dig deeper as to where those disagreements come from. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, I think that there's no way to avoid the collective unconscious osmosis that happens creatively. You know, I talk a lot about this with music, but it's very easy to rip something off, and musically, creatively, in writing, in even something like a YouTube video. Um, I think we're at the point now in society and culturally where there's just so much information available and so easy to get into stuff and understand it that like you find that like people really aren't that different with their some opinions, you know? Like how many times have you tried to tell a joke and somebody was just about to say it? You know, it happens to me and Super RPG friends all the time. You know, like you just take different paths to get there sometimes, and it's like I totally understand that reservation of like, and I really applaud that actually as like an artistic endeavor to be like, I'm not going to watch the most popular video because I want to do this blind in my own way, and I think that to convey that into video games, I think that that's like super important for getting a good full experience with RPGs that are in essence a very, say it again, feels based kind of genre. Because if you have your like if you go into Star Ocean 5 expecting a mid game, which is something you'll find out in 5 minutes anyway, but if you go into it expecting that, it does affect your perception, and then you're gonna start looking for things, especially somebody who is analytical or whatever. So I think it's impossible to really divorce perception and discourse from your own opinion. But like at the same time, I think using it as a foil is just as harmful. Like Andrew was talking about his FF2 video and people saying like, "Oh yeah, you just hit your own party members and blah blah blah." It's really easy to devote your entire endeavor to talking just about that one point. Or let's say you had watched Resident Arc Xenogears video, which I haven't seen that yet. But if you watch that and you're like, "Oh, he didn't talk about this. I'm going to make sure to bring that up." It does affect your art, right? And
100%.
so it's like where this is such a broad topic, you know, like it's hard to sort of hammer it down to the specific. Uh but I'm curious as to, has there ever been a time with you guys where you've just been unable to get what you think is an authentic experience from an RPG?
I would say yes, and part of that is down to uh, okay, so like I'm going to be upfront about this with the Final Fantasy retrospectives. Like when I'm recording the games for my first playthrough, my first full playthrough of these games. That's part of the goal. Is like I'm playing through the games for the first time, and I am using a guide or a text based walkthrough for that. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I don't miss anything, so that I can experience as much as I can on that first playthrough, so that subsequent playthroughs of maybe later versions, I don't have to think so hard about what I need to do. I can just go through it later. Um, but just but walkthroughs are obviously written by people who are intimately familiar with the game already and have a particular idea of how one should play the game. And based on the game that the walkthrough is for, that may have a minor effect because you can only play the game in so many ways, or it could have a major effect like Final Fantasy VIII. I know that if you know what you're doing, you can break that game in half. You can get the best magic to junction onto your stats. You can get the best weapons. You can get all the best cards in triple triad to make the best stuff. You can turn off random encounters. I didn't do that for my playthrough. The most I did in my initial playthrough was I bought a bunch of tents and found out I could break them down into Kiragas, and I was just like, "Fuck yeah!" I didn't know that. But that's an organic thing.
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
other
it's
way the
emergent.
other way
You
yeah,
discovered it
yeah,
yourself, like yeah, through its own
exactly,
organics.
it's emergent gameplay, which I think is great. Uh, when you discover something yourself, there's always that wonderful feeling because you feel accomplished. Whereas if you're using a walkthrough, then depending on who wrote the walkthrough, they may say, again, for Final Fantasy VIII, "Oh, you gotta do this is how you play the game." And 8 is something I'm going to bring up a whole lot throughout this video because there's so much you can talk about with Final Fantasy 8 specifically because of just how open-ended that game is, for good or for ill. A lot of people are very split on that game. I've found for every one person who loves it, there's another person who absolutely hates it, and I'm just kind of like in the middle.
Mm. Agnostic, FF8 agnostic. So, at the risk of sounding a little bit semantic, I do want to say something because I hear something because you said it, and I'm not attacking you or necessarily like your arguments
Right?
and concerns about the game, but the whole concept of like if you know how to do it, then it's easy, right? That
Yeah.
is such. This is because I catch myself saying it all the time, and I always try to challenge myself to be like, what could I do to like think about this statement more, right? So it's like FF8's a really good example because if you can, do triple triad and junction flare to your weapon and watch Squall one hit KO everything until the third disc, like it's a joke, but like that's true of like every game. It's just I think the difference is if you're guided, right?
Right.
So you discovered the Kiraga thing by yourself. Again, we said that was emergent gameplay. Fuck yeah, that's the way the system was designed to mess around with shit. As you get new skills, you want to mess around with it, blah blah blah. That's like the natural progression. Some people will discover the triple triad exploits or not exploits. It's definitely designed to do that, right?
Yeah.
On their own. I wouldn't necessarily say that's just a matter of knowing what to do so much as it is being guided toward a specific thing. So, like, if you know in Elden Ring to rush and get, I don't think you can get rush Rivers of Blood. I don't know. But, like, if you know to rush and get a weapon really fast, then that is like super easy to work with. Yeah, of course it's going to be easier, right? But like in the grand scheme of things, who mechanically has an easier time? Somebody who adapts to something or somebody who is guided, right? And it's going to be usually the former. So it's like this. It's a really interesting dynamic, I think, that we get into with guides, like as a supplement.
Right.
Majuular, how about you? Do you use guides or like when you go into a game, do you try to do the blind run through? Do you try to, look on game facts and then make horny posts?
Yes to all. No, I try to go through games blind. The problem is that like there's a certain expectation in terms of like your ability to discover like side content and to be able to complete like side activities and
Yes.
stuff. It depends on the game. I try to keep like as far as RPGs go, I try to keep like many saves. That way when I do inevitably go kind of look at the things that are missable, I can just sort of return to that point and kind of record footage. But I try to keep it as blind as humanly possible while I play the game, because yeah, I agree. There's a easy way to like spoil that experience. Your point with FF8, it's like one of those games where yeah, it's in a sense having a first playthrough is kind of like makes or breaks the experience for you, because after that it's all of these like things, these tips, these tricks, they permanently become available to you, and then like not ruining subsequent experiences is a matter of you purposely playing less efficiently, which is
Mm-hmm.
something I have a big problem with. I hate it when like people say, well, you can have your own difficulty by like not doing this or not
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Self-imposed difficulty for me doesn't wash. I don't really dig that. So but yeah,
How
I
you
would
said
say I
that,
try to keep
yeah.
as blind as possible, but you know, in this position you do kind of need to take liberties now and then to like make sure you're actually doing the things in the game, right?
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and that your point about self-imposed difficulty, I especially agree with, because I feel like if you have to go out of your way to prevent yourself from doing something that mechanically is a core part of the game or is a part of the game that is unrestricted, then you're not really engaging with the intended experience, are you? Like, as much as I love them, Nuzlocks for Pokemon, I love
Yeah.
Nuzlocks. I think they're a ton of fun. But if you feel like you need to play a Nuzlocke in order to enjoy a Pokemon game at all, you probably just don't enjoy Pokemon.
Sure.
Actually, funny enough, Stormcassie in the chat says that there were she did everything. She felt like she did everything out of order in Gen 9 in Scarlet and Violet,
Mhm.
and like sometimes it doesn't feel that good or whatever. And so did I, but I thought that was the cool part about it, because I ended up doing one of the super late Titans first, and I was like, oh, this boy is thick. This is a thick
Same,
fucking boy.
same.
And
I hit Great Tusk too early and got my
that's what
shit
I did.
kicked
That's the
in.
one I did. Yep, yep. And I think that's fucking awesome that you can do that in games. Our last podcast, by the way, folks, if you like what you see, if you see what you like, go ahead and check our VODs up on youtube.com/Cerulean Skies Live. You can check out all the RPG podcasts. Yeah. If you listen to that, we kind of talked a little bit about the freedom aspect of RPGs and all that kind of stuff. But I really love that concept, and I think it's really cool. But I got a quick question for you guys. Has there
Mhm.
been a time, as content creators, has there been a time when the quote unquote prescription of content creation has affected the way that you've played a game, both positively or negatively, depending on how you want to answer it?
I'll defer to you. You can go ahead here first if you'd like.
Um, kind of. I mean, as I play a game for a video, particularly the Final Fantasies, I'll have like a Word document open and I'll take notes. So I'll pause while playing and recording and just like jot down my thoughts. Um, and I try to see everything I can, or I'll like take a moment to and like admire something that maybe I wouldn't consider as much if I was playing organically. Um, but honestly, when I'm recording a game for a video, I am almost certainly just playing it how I would like. Maybe I'm doing a little bit more so I have something to show because there's
Yeah,
something I
yeah.
want to talk about I normally wouldn't do in that game. But by and large, the way I approach the game isn't all that different aside of pauses to take notes or whatever. Or most recently, having to take long, unscheduled breaks because of hardware problems. Because this last week, my PS2's DVD laser
Oh,
gave
I
out
remember this story.
while
Yeah.
recording Final Fantasy
Yeah,
X.
yeah, yeah.
And then when I was recording Final Fantasy VIII in the spring, I had to replace the first 3 discs as I was playing because I got locked somewhere. And then I checked the disc wouldn't fully get ripped by image burn. I was like, God damn it. But yeah, Final Fantasy VIII is cursed. That is the moral of the story.
I'm not disagreeing, and I love FF8. So, uh, Majuular, how about you? Is it like okay? So this is a question for you as well to sort of piggyback on this. As a again, I'll use this term, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing it now. But as a long form content creator, do you think that there is something that's expected of you? Are you expected to play a game in a certain way?
Um, I'm kind of of two minds when it comes to that. I would say like when it comes to expectation, one thing I've learned is that like well, I'm like a very I'm very self-conscious while I'm playing. I feel I feel like people will care or will notice about things probably more than they do, which leads me to play like more thoroughly than I perhaps would on my own, which actually is good in some cases. Just going through, I'm just editing my Yakuza 5 video right now. Like, I played that game in a way that ultimately made it more enjoyable because I was aware of the expectation, as opposed to like how I would usually play it, which is like I usually like at a certain point I just get like I try to like do every bullet point thing on the list and then I just get bored of it and start bum rushing the story to get to the end.
Mm.
Whereas here I'm like I kind of took a more leisurely pace about it and it was a much better experience. Um but yeah, I would say people people don't really like notice as much as you think they do these things. And partially it's because a lot of people consume long form content while they're doing like other shit.
Yeah.
So like you got a second monitor, you're listening to it while doing chores and stuff. Um, and then part of it is just like yeah, people are in it for you, for the words that you're saying, for the experience that you had. And as long as you're not like playing in a way that's like actively detrimental to the experience, or you're making arguments that aren't well supported or unfair, um, people don't really care that much. But yeah, for me personally, I would say honestly, yes, I do. I do play in a little bit more of like a thorough manner, just as to make sure that I don't miss anything. People are going to be like, "How could you miss the wizard sword? It's in level 2, right at the beginning." It's like I don't know, man. I was half in the bag. I'm just kidding. That doesn't happen.
Because the wizard, because it's because the wizard sword lets you unlock the witch's gate on level 92 and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah, no, that's like
Sometimes you just can't win.
yeah, yeah, no. I mean, there's nothing that you can do that's gonna fully escape the pedantry on the internet, right? Especially
Right.
as people who put their stuff out there for people to watch and consume.
Oh
Uh,
man, like you yeah, I
I've
had an
seen the
experience
comments
like
on
that
both of your
earlier.
videos. I've seen what
Have
happens.
you have you seen the comments on like the Final Fantasy video that came up like a few days ago? Someone was giving me crap about saying, "Oh, I played the original Famicom version when I just emulated it because it was the
How
only
dare
thing I
you?
could do."
How dare you emulate a game that is so fucking stupid, man?
How
But
could
no,
you even think you're getting the actual experience?
I got a little too worked up over it. I'll admit that much.
dude, sometimes it just happens. You know, it just you just gotta like take it. You know, you just have to give into the rage. You know, you have to make an exception to your rule just to feel something again. I understand. I get it.
It got a little too real at the end.
Never read the
Yeah.
comments, but you got to try reading the comments when you're a small channel.
I
You
honestly,
reply to those comments, and that's more comments, and you boost yourself in the algorithm. Engagement is good.
that is
That's
also true.
why my friends who don't even watch my videos will still pop in to like them because they know
Right.
it helps.
Yeah, that's good.
I honestly, like as far as comments go, I once you accept the fact that like a certain percentage of people are just going to be negative, I actually really do like enjoy spending some time scrolling through my comments because like there's obviously like a propensity as a human being to like remember the one negative thing out of 1,000 things total. Um, but like yeah, like my girlfriend then well she'll sit like on the couch with me sometimes and just scroll through comments and be like, "Oh, this is so nice. This person said this." And it's like, yeah, like it's there's just like having these like conversations and like having people who like enjoy you enjoying something they like. That's why I love playing games I've never played before. Like when I played Xenogears and having all these people who are just like they feel like it's just like some cool relative is like watching you play a video game. I don't know if you ever had that.
Yeah, no, I know
You're
what
like
you mean. I know what you mean.
you're playing a
Yeah.
game as a kid, yeah, and then like some distant uncle who lives in like Illinois shows up, and he's like, "Oh, this is so cool." He hasn't played a video game since like 1987. So to him, and you're like, "Yeah, you know what? This is cool. I'm gonna start showing him all the cool stuff." And that's kind of like the vibe that I like try to capture. It's like I'm not the greatest at this game, and I'm not gonna like hit every check mark that a super fan wants. But as long as the majority of people can see that I'm like partaking in something that they value, then like that whatever. That's as much of a win as you're ever gonna get on any platform, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's super gratifying whenever I see on the Final Fantasy One videos comments, people saying, "I'm a huge super fan of Final Fantasy, and I thought they knew everything there was to know, and you showed me like 10 things I never knew."
Yeah, totally.
Hell yeah. Well, that brings me to a point that I had here in the notes about the idea of like social learning or operant conditioning in this context, right? You know, because you go on Twitter and you see again, this is a hypothetical. It's not the truth, but you go on Twitter and you see everybody saying, "Dude, Sonic Frontiers absolutely fucking rips, perfect game, 10 out of 10, blah blah blah," and there's a part of you. Andrew was joking about this earlier, but there's a part of you that like I feel like almost wants to be the contrarian, to be like, well, it can't be that fucking good, right? So you feel like you have to like almost like FOMO, right?
Feel personally attacked.
Yeah. Wait,
Hey, it's me in
does
high
this
school.
happen to you?
I honestly like I try to stay like when it comes to like topics on social media with gaming. I've learned enough just having like lunch with my family and listening to them like hash out like politics at the lunch table. Sometimes
Ooh.
the greatest like thing you can do as somebody who wants to come across as informed is to just kind of sit things out for a little bit and like let the
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
take
yeah.
place.
Absolute,
But there is a
absolutely.
strong I have a strong like inner temptation to play devil's advocate at like every opportunity. I have to like fight against it daily, just to not like start something. Because I'm a very agreeable guy and I like everybody getting along, but at the same time, I'm always holding this match. And I'm like, what if I just threw this on the house? Wouldn't that be kind of funny?
Devil's advocate may cry. Yeah, I understand. Uh,
Exactly.
no, I think that yeah, and then like conversely, you know, you just want to play something good, right? Like you know, I was actually funny enough. This is why I got into Romancing Saga, because I heard that people were saying it was really good. And I was like, oh, I want like an RPG, an older RPG that I haven't touched to play. I want to try it out. And I did. And because of that, because I wanted maybe not necessarily to be a part of the conversation, but because of social influence and discourse, right? It felt like there was something there that I was missing that I really wanted, you know, and maybe that's a selfish thing or whatever, but I feel like that does affect our perception, because if it's something, if we go into it almost expecting that to fill our void in our knowledge, in our whatever, if it's going to hit the spot, you know, I feel like that does affect our perception. If you want a burger is always the best when you want a burger or you're fucking unbelievably hungry. There's no, you're not like, you don't have the mundane burger that hits super hard. Nobody remembers those fucking burgers. Everybody remembers the hungry burgers and the edible hit at the wrong time and now I'm fucking starving burger. And you know, I feel like there's something to be said psychologically for that, right? I don't know how to fully articulate this, but I think you guys understand what I'm putting down, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
would say there's something sometimes you can tell based on like the gaming zeitgeist, like you just intuitively know that something's gonna be right up your alley for sure.
yeah, and
Yeah.
is that such like a, oh, is that like how influential to your gaming habits is that? Would you guys say?
For me, um, anyone who knows me knows that am incredibly uh disillusioned with the AAA video game industry. And that's not necessarily on principle, although it should be based on just how the AAA space operates these days, but that's a whole other discussion. With how AAA games, they typically they kind of fall into this pile of mush. Like a lot of action games adopt RPG mechanics, which feel to me like a band-aid or a shortcut to not being able to create interesting mechanical challenge and instead make it a numbers challenge, which is totally arbitrary. But moreover, it's that, was I going somewhere with this? God.
I asked you if, I guess, if like there is some kind of discourse that does like help you get the burger in your mouth, basically.
Um, Not often. Because I remember for years people were hyping up Elden Ring, and for the longest time I was like, "What's an Elden Ring?" And then like 2 months before it comes out, it's like I finally learned, oh, it's a Souls like. It's from Soft
Mhm.
with George R. R. Martin. I'm just like, I do not give a shit about Game of Thrones. I do not give a shit about Souls. I am checked out of this conversation. And I see people talking about it. I'm just like, I'm glad you guys are having fun. I'm just, don't talk to me about it because you're not going to get anything interesting. Not necessarily you're going to get anything negative. You're just not going to get anything of interest.
Yeah, and so this is a thing too. Is I feel like analysis breeds this, and discourse will often breed this thing of like, I need to have something to say. And to me, I think like when you engage in media just to have something to say, why? Like
Yeah.
not everyone needs to be. Everyone, you need to sit down in that cuck chair. You need to listen. Like.
Yeah. Yeah, like, years ago, I used to do like game reviews, like bi-weekly game reviews. I did like 20 of them, and I burned out hard because I was forcing myself to play those games, and it got to the point where like for like a half a year or so, I just didn't really play any video games. I couldn't enjoy games, and Persona 5 pulled me out of that because I popped that in and I just got engrossed in it.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I agree. It's like I don't buy new games often, like brand new games often, because like it's not even just an interest thing, but it's uh there are so few that catch my attention, and I don't feel like I need to be part of every conversation because not every conversation interests me. Like
Or
people
is
were
it,
talking
yeah, or is about you, and it's like I feel like that's something that people like that seeps into difficulty discourse too, and
yeah.
I hate it. But I do want to also bring up something regarding this too, is the concept of like holding steadfast to your opinions despite adversity, right? So for example, let's say, how do I say this? I really hate I'm just saying this as an example. I really
Okay.
hate Final Fantasy 2. It sucks. Okay? And then Andrew sits me down in my cuck chair and he says, "Listen, here's why it doesn't suck." There is a sort of, no matter how objective you are as a person, right? It's
Right.
human nature um to be like, "Well, I have my beliefs on this." And like Majuular was saying about watching his family like, like just Looney Tunes dust cloud politics while he sits back and watches the house burn. And it's like,
Yes, good.
yeah, destroy each other. Yes. But like, yeah, there's this kind of thing to like stick to your guns, man, and like, I feel like a lot of that ties into insecurity, right? Like,
Right.
uh, a lot of times people will. This happens so often with FF13. Man, it happens. I try not to mention FF13, but it happens so fucking much with this game. People are like so much on either one side of the fence. It's either like, "Oh, this is the worst game ever. It's a hallway simulator. Let me regurgitate 400 game facts forum posts saying the same shit." And then there's like some horny fucking zoomer who's like, "Bro, it's the fucking best RPG. Let me tell you. You have so much freedom. Like the visuals are absolutely stunning.
Why are
Lightning's a
you
queen."
so right?
Yeah, and it's like,
Have you been on the Final Fantasy subreddit like ever,
No, a
because
little bit, a long time
like
ago.
it
Like,
seems like every day there's like at least one thread where someone's like, "Why do people hate Final Fantasy 13? I think it's great," or some variation of that,
yeah,
and
and
I'm
it's
just
it's
like,
that same fucking repetitive cycle, and it
yeah,
happens with
and
Souls games.
this is coming from someone who has played like maybe an hour or two of 13 over a decade ago and doesn't really have much of an opinion on it at the moment because of the distance.
Mhm.
So I can't attest to that, but dear God, it is annoying to hear that repeated over and over
Right.
and over.
And I bring this up because I know you're on the cusp of it too. Well, sort of. And so like I know that's not going to be something that you're going to be able to completely remove yourself from, as we're talking about here. So it's like, I don't know. I feel like people definitely have this tendency to love a 6 too much, you know? And like, I mean, I see myself doing it too. I sit here and I defend Star Ocean 4 vehemently because people like to disagree with me on that a lot. But it's like, I feel like it's important to sort of understand that about yourself and about the way that you approach games, because like all you got to do, man, you got to here's my crystal spiel where I try to sell everybody on incense and crystals, is that you just got to like let yourself have a good time, bro. You know, just like open your mind a little bit. Um
Yeah,
so,
that really liking a 6 out of 10 thing. That especially is a good point, because like there's plenty of media out there that's like, kind of mediocre or just sort of okay or above average, and there are people that are ride or die for it. Because of
yeah.
some elements or other. Typically you see this with a lot of camp.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I'm not putting down camp. I'm just using that as an example because it's a really easy example to use. And people will defend it to death and they'll talk it up. And that usually is a direct reaction to uh, critical tepidness or strong negativity lodged towards it. Like, for example, a video I have on the docket for next year, I'm going to do a video about the original Broly movie, Dragon Ball Z, the eighth DBZ movie, because I love that movie to death. I grew up with it. And I have particularly strong attachment to the English dub, especially. Like, I don't care what you say, that soundtrack fucking slaps. That introduced me to some great bands. Like, my first vinyl record is Dusu's Aquavita, which had one song from that in that movie. Great album, by the way. Definitely check it out. And so, yeah, that video, in a sense, is going to be me defending a 6 out of 10 on some metrics.
Mhm.
I've seen people call that movie mid, but I think it's like the best of the original 13 DBZ movies. No fucking shame. But on the games front, like I love Freak Style for the PS2.
Never played it.
I'm
Have you
looking it
heard of
up right now. I gotta
It's,
know.
it's Freak with two E's. Freak with two E's. It's all one word.
Freak?
It Yeah, Freak Style. Like I like it for its aesthetic. I like it for its soundtrack. Um, it's the song that you hear all the time in it is called "Slip Away" by Dry Cell, and the album art's gonna probably stick with you a bit, just because like, that's funny, that's something. But like, I will defend that game to death, not because it's great,
Well,
but because I love it.
it's a motocross racing game, and it's your duty as a native Floridian to defend
I am
this.
not a native Floridian. I'm from Philly.
Oh, my bad.
Very,
As a
very quick
Philly
to correct
transport.
you.
Yeah.
My cousin who lives in Jersey, he was about to go pro in motocross, like at the turn of the decade.
That is a Jersey thing too. Yes, it's very big there. I swear. And I'm
Interesting.
generalizing, but
No, you're fine. You're fine. I don't associate with that side of the family. Make all the jokes you want.
yeah. Fuck Andrew's family too. You know.
That's what I say.
Yeah, exactly. Let them fight amongst themselves. Among
That
themselves.
is what I say, unironically.
Modular, I got a question for you, man. Rating scales. Because I have a question further about this. How do you feel about this? Do you rate games? Do you have some kind of system in place? Would you ever describe a game as a 6 out of 10?
I personally, like, in my videos, I've never used a rating scale. For the type of video that I do, I'm generally opposed to that kind of thing because
Yeah.
I don't know. To me, it feels better to kind of sum things up with a little miniature essay within the video. But that's just me. I definitely do see like the utility in rating scales and things like that. Like absolutely for like, especially if you're talking about like you're the type of person who's doing like every new game that comes out and you're constantly having to review like AAA releases. Certainly there's a time and a place for that, and like just the term 6 out of 10, even like taking away the literal meaning in it, there is like an inherent value in that because everybody kind of knows what you're talking about when you use it. But yeah, personally I don't use it just because I don't know, for the types of games I've done, it's a little bit too reductive for me.
Yeah, yeah. And this is another CS inside joke, but we say arbitrary and reductive to anything that, like, has sort of utility in that sense, like
Arbitrary, reductive, esoteric.
yeah, 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 obtuse, yeah. Throw around a bunch of words, but no, it's I think, I mean, I love rating things. I like making tier lists. It's fun, but like,
Yeah, top
it's
tens are
only,
a great time.
yeah, and it's cool, but like, you can't be too rigid about it, right? Because if like you can't be like, oh well, I put Halo 2 over Halo 3, like I mean, yeah, you might prefer one over the other, but like
After my own heart.
yeah, Halo 2 is the best one, by the way.
It is.
Yeah, but
it fucking is.
4 is close. 4 is close. But like, so like
Oh,
this.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
In terms of story, I agree.
But like, yeah. So you have these kind of, they're all they are is like heuristics, right? Like, there's always more. There should be more nuance. Some people, no, they exist solely as number ratings. If you write for Pitchfork Media, that's usually probably your way of understanding and like incorporating critical thought. But
I
like,
write for Torch Media.
that's okay. But like, yeah, so I don't think there's anything inherently bad about it, but I'm wondering like if that concept just is sort of poison in a lot of ways, especially if you're doing some kind of analysis content specifically, because if you make a video on what's the game, Crisis Core Remastered, right? And you're like, I think I'm giving that a 7 out of 10. I'm gonna stick with that. It goes back to this holding steadfast, to your number. You're always gonna lean back on that number, and things are too fluid for that, man. You can't just ice up. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I hear where you're coming from there, and that's why I think like there is definitely like a distinction to be made between people who are making like longer kind of this like newer YouTube industry of like super long analysis videos and like your IGNs and your game spots and everything like that. Which is why I say I see the utility in it, and like as a consumer friendly way basically to convey like quality in the most objective way you can. um there is value in it, and like obviously there can be extremes there that are harmful. For example, IGN, I think I may have even mentioned this when we were on Super RPG Friends, but the imagine Party Babies having like a 7.5 out of 10,
Yeah,
and then like
yeah.
God Hand being rated a 3 out of 10,
Right.
and those numbers are forever etched in IGNs. Like that is what they are, right?
Yeah,
As
the
you
too
say.
much water meme. And it's like, okay, so I get it in a
right.
way. I get it in a way because people are like, oh, like maybe that's not the best, most credible thing, but people forget that that's just one person's rating, and B, like, do this stupid fucking thing where they're like, oh, this is the same site that said 6 out of 10, too much water. Look how fucking stupid they are, despite the fact that I'm sharing their posts and giving them social media traction. And it's like,
Classic.
yeah, fucking so stupid. Like, so
it
dumb.
doesn't help that it may be the one person who's doing it for the site, but people aren't going to think of that one person unless something especially egregious happens regarding that one person and that review.
Sure.
Like that, there was like that one person I think at IGN who basically, who not even plagiarized a Dead Cells review off of a small YouTuber. So, and IGN resolved that. They got fired and they wrote a whole other review, which that's good. But that's beside the point. The 7.8 out of 10 meme, nobody remembers who wrote that. They just remember IGN gave it that rating.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not Joe Piscopo. Yes, I know that there's someone who with a very similar name. Don't undermine the point.
Piscopo.
We're not talking about Joe Piscopo. We're talking about Joe Piscopo.
Yeah.
He's a game reviewer.
The made up, the made up version. Yeah.
Joe Piscopo may have written it, but people only remember it being an IGN interview. IGN behind it. God Hand 3 out of 10. Pokemon Alpha Sapphire 7.8. Imagine Baby Designer Honey Boo Boo, whatever the fuck.
Yeah,
7.5 out of 10. It doesn't matter that that's three different people. Those are three different people at the same website, and people are going to remember the website.
Yeah. No, and I would just add that like that's why for the type of like reviews, and I think like more it's becoming more popular. People are more gravitating towards like the long form stuff because video games I don't think are reviewable quite in the same way as like a movie is or something. And like not to like diminish at all, like obviously film is just an entirely different art form.
I got a coaster that says as much on my wall.
It literally says that.
I mean, it says degree of Bachelor of Arts film. I guess that's close enough.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
There
you go. I'm suddenly very underqualified to say anything from here on out.
No, you're good.
But no, it's I just for people who just love video games and love to like talk about the experience of playing them and share that with people. I don't think most people's brains aren't really wired in a way where you can assign a numerical value to that. So I don't think it's very useful in those cases.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, sorry, go ahead.
No, you finish.
Okay. I was just going to say like the master pizza chef, let's talk, do a little IGN comparison here. The master pizza chef has made an amazing Michelin 3-star pizza. It takes the dough 96 hours to rise, and he gets his ingredients. He ships them from Naples, and it's all magnificent stuff. But if he wants to run like a functional business and make consumers happy and basically like be able to operate in this world, he needs to cut some corners in certain places. He needs to say it's not actually worth the like extreme amount of work and the extreme amount of like the problems I'm putting myself through to make this. You need to be able to make like a more consumer friendly pizza, right? And that's what those like review scores, that's what they are. That's consumer friendly pizza. There's nothing wrong with having Domino's. It's probably better to support your local pizzeria and like have like a really good quality pie. But if you're at a hotel somewhere and you don't know what's around,
everything in its place.
Domino's is the spot.
Everything in its place. Yeah, and so exactly. Like you have to. That's why, okay, I fucking hate game journalism. I hate it. I will not read a review. I don't give a shit. But I'm not going to sit there and be like, look at these fucking game journals, whoa, because it's just as fucking corny as like people who are like, well, like who completely lean on that scale.
There are the two genders of game journalism are literally just misogynists and or Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And people who actually recognize that game journalist outlets are basically just an extension of marketing arm for large publishers.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big part of it. And not all the time. I mean, that's why you guys do your thing too, and why a lot of creators focus on reviews rather, because not everybody who does reviews does it for clicks or for money or for clout or whatever. Like, they just like to do it. Few and far between, don't get me wrong, but it still happens. I do this is a very broad topic, so I do kind of want to reel it back a little bit, and I want to ask a question about analysis affecting perception, right? So, and I'm kind of directing this toward Majuular because you did a Xenogears video, and sorry, Andrew, I know that this is on the slate for you, but this is a really good example of this question, or this question rather. Do you think there's an almost seesaw effect between, or rather, with what the game is trying to do versus what it actually does? And the end deliverance of the product versus the sort of intended thing. So talk a lot about developer intent on this podcast. This is an important thing to think about. So think about Xenogears, for example. Think about how many people have made 3+ hour long videos on Xenogears. Think about how many like 4 a.m. conversations about like Jungian psychology and even like Jacques Lacan, have happened because is it Jacques? I don't remember. Lacan. It's French. Whatever. Fuck it. They don't. Is that? I just like. Hold on. Is that his first name?
I'm adding.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
It is Jacques. Okay.
I am officially adding Xenogears to the list.
Jacques.
Funny you mentioned stuff like that. That's what I'm doing for Final Fantasy VI.
Hell yeah. So yeah,
not those specific things, but same vein.
But yeah, so the idea of like the actual product versus what you can glean from it. So Xenogears, for those who don't know or who, I'm not going to spoil anything, but Xenogears is a very flawed game, like in terms of an experience, right? There are things that are described in the game that don't really make sense. Some stats don't work. There's a couple weird issues, the insane game balance, the whole second disc dilemma about it, being mostly text-based. So, like, despite all those things, Xenogears to me is, like, one of the best games ever made. There is this element of giving it the pass, right, in a way. Right. Because your analysis leads that openness, right? So, is there a seesaw effect between what the game is actually trying to do and what the product delivers, Majuular?
Yeah, I would say, like, I know exactly what you mean here. Xenogears might be the most apt example of a lot. There definitely can be, and like as to whether or not that ultimately like makes a difference for you is going to be very, very individual. And like as much as when I make a video on Xenogears or Legend of Dragoon or something, I get kind of swept away in the immediate fan base and their kind of perception of things. You have to acknowledge that whether or not the intention was different, 99.9% of people that will have played or touched this game, they don't actually give a shit about that. What they care about. Exactly, right. It takes a certain kind of person to actually like care enough to do research on a video game, right? To some people, that idea itself is kind of outrageous. But like, I think that it contextualizes and kind of frames things in a way where it's really hard to not look at it a different way if you know, right? Like, if I'm playing Xenogears with all of this stuff in mind, naturally, my experience is going to be a little bit different than like somebody who just kind of bought it in like 1998 or whatever and is playing it blind, because like all of this stuff is contextualized for me. It's probably easier to forgive, and a lot of this stuff is probably subconscious on some level. But I guess the question is like, how forgiving of a person are you, and how much can you sort of enjoy something based on the intent versus the action, right?
Yeah.
I think it makes for an interesting conversation at the very least.
Yeah, at first, you're getting a lot of Majuular comments in the chat. Great. Yeah. So in case if you can thank us for that one. I'm not going to apologize because there's nothing to apologize for. Also, Six said that you love a glass of milk at 78 degrees warm, and I'm a big fan of that.
Hold on, I'm Canadian. Let me look this up.
Fuck. Hold on. Wait. Hold on. Give me a sec. Hold on.
Okay, I won't tell you.
25.
Yeah,
25 something. I don't know what though.
It would be 26, but yeah, 25. 25.55.
Okay, cool.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
I used to have to do conversions all the time, and I just learned the thing, and I try to do it in my head in the most like.
It's like 5/9 minus 32.
Yeah. I have like my math is also fields based.
I took a high school I took physics in high school for for 1 year, but we went through like over a dozen teachers because of just like circumstance. Like they kept having to leave. And oh man, by the end, like before we got the last one, the principal came in before class and expressed his frustration about it because we weren't really learning much. And then the last teacher that we had basically just for homework the night before the test gave us the test.
Well, physics is feels based, so it's very down to your own
Not
interpretation.
again, no.
Physics.
No. So like, okay, warm glass of milk. I feel like this does apply to Xenogears in a way because the Majuular factor is especially high with that game because it touches on a lot of very personal topics, right? So even if you don't, I guess, are in the rare camp who actually explores stuff like very actively, like searches YouTube and looks up videos or buys the perfect works book, which is over here somewhere. Like even if you're one of those, even if you're not one of those people, there's going to be something about that game that like resonates with you, whether or not you care about all the subtext in it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that like there's that that adage I always fucking think of is that like, sometimes I think it's from House of Leaves, I believe. But like you can sit there and you can analyze the whale in Moby Dick, right? And you can say, oh, this is representative of this, blah, 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 blah. And this is a philosophy 101 touchstone. But you can do that, but sometimes the whale is just a fucking whale, bro.
Right.
And like, yeah, it's cool to like be like, oh, the whale did this, but and you could glean whatever you want from it, and that's awesome. But I think sometimes you can get so in the weeds with something that it starts to lose its meaning, and it becomes this weird, like, chimeric construction of like your own biases with what other people want you to have. And I feel like that's I thought this topic would be really interesting for you both because that's something that you always have to deal with when you make analyses is that, right? How to slay the chimera in the room.
Yeah, and like with the Final Fantasy 3 video in particular, I had to like really I kind of had to confront that because I kind of centered that video around how Final Fantasy 3 was in a sense a product of grief because for those who don't know, Hironobu Sakaguchi's mother died during the development of that game, and while it's often attributed that her death and his grieving was the impetus for Final Fantasy VII, that's been kind of misconstrued from a PlayStation Magazine interview about Final Fantasy VII, where Sakaguchi said, "Oh yeah, she died during development of Final Fantasy III," which here in North America, Final Fantasy III was what we called Final Fantasy VI.
Oh
So
yeah,
yeah, the implication there that a lot of people gleaned was, oh, it was during the most recent game before 7 that she died, and people kind of ran with it from there. And it's true that he did dwell on those feelings to kind of outline 7, but in the throes of it, he was still working on Final Fantasy 3 when she died. And I saw that there was death everywhere. And I was looking at all this and I kind of like was framing it in the context of grieving, of mourning, of finding meaning in life as well as death. So I had to take pains to not try to ascribe too much of that to every aspect. So I did pick and choose, and I went very direct uh with the parallels that I could find. Like the deaths in the game, that's obvious. Um, but I also had to look more into how Sakaguchi himself was feeling about it, how he was processing it, and then relating that back to like the core themes or messages of the game. Uh, so when it comes to overanalyzing, you do have to find a way to ground yourself. You you have to find whenever you feel like you're reaching, go cycle back to the really basic, easily identifiable stuff that ties back to that, and see how much of a sort of like
Occam's razor.
logical. It's not just Occam's razor. It's also uh like how many not leaps in logic, but how many steps do you have to take to connect from that one that can best be attributed to Occam's razor to this one you may be doubting whether or not there is anything there. Like if you like there's a point where there's too much and you have to like start scrutinizing every step along that path.
Yeah, yeah. To get to that, yeah, that's it. So okay, I get a question as well. Modular. Any examples of games that you can think of that really warrant this analysis, the kind of Xenogearsian analysis?
Any games that aren't Xenogears that
Yeah, yeah.
require the Xenogears.
Yeah, okay.
Like honestly, I don't even necessarily think Xenogears necessitates the Xenogearsian analysis.
Yeah, thank you.
Um,
Yes. Yes, that's
I would
a really
say
good answer, actually.
I would say that like I'm not a writer and I have no background in like dissecting any kind like stories or anything like that. Um, what do they call that? Literary critique? Nothing like that. But like intuitively, it seems to me like people who are writing and creating these stories are trying to convey feelings and themes, but they're not actually trying to convey their like lives. They're not necessarily trying to like
Right.
there's the idea it's very interesting to go back and look at something in retrospect knowing like what the creator was going through at the time, whether it was like they were going through depression or whether like somebody close to them had passed away, and kind of looking at through that lens. But at the same time, um I think it's as an artist, what you're trying to do is basically to create an atmosphere and to create a story that exists sort of outside of yourself and outside of your own immediate experience. And so there's always going to be people who want to look more deeply into that. I'm guilty of that. I always like look up like music artists I like to just kind of get a sense for their life, and it's like, yeah, and then you go back and there's always the temptation to constantly be looking at things through this lens and trying to like extrapolate meaning where there isn't necessarily. There could be, but it's like the larger point I guess is does it matter if there is? Can't you just like internalize this for what it is instead of trying to speculate on those things?
Right, because okay, a good example in Xenogears is the Bart and fuck, what's his last name? I forgot his last name. Bart's last name in Xenogears.
Oh, Fatima.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you can say the Fatima brothers and the Figaro brothers in FF6. It's the same thing, right? It's a direct parallel. And you could be like, well, they just copied that. Saga just copied that, and just that was just the logical thing. But just fucking, you could do that. You could be a little shit. You could be annoying about it. Like
They just copied Palom and Porum from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, you can do that. And I think that's interesting to look at from a developmental way, from like it's like architectural thing. But also remember that games are products unlike anything else. Just like a film is a product. It's at the end of the day something that is sold and needs to meet a certain audience, regardless of how artistic and lofty the ambitions of the developers might be. So like sometimes, we've used this word a lot this podcast, but I think it's really accurate, is utility. There is utility in whether it be creative recycling or just like a further extrapolation of ideas or whatever. And sometimes that matches up a little bit with our personal or emotive responses to the media that we are consuming. And
and recycling can be used as a tool of expediency. It can be used for shorthand. Like for example, in Disney's Hercules, when young Hercules goes to the Temple of Zeus for guidance, he gets on his knees and puts his hands together and prays like a Christian. A Greek would not have done that, but because this would be made for Western audience, presumably a predominantly Christian audience, the audience would associate that action, that body language, with piety.
Yeah.
So instead of having to explain how, why Hercules is like sacrificing a goat on an altar in a Disney movie, which is what the Greeks probably would have done at the time, they just have him get on his knees like a good Christian boy, and the audience immediately understands.
Yes, and I don't always think that that's a bad thing, right? Like, so you could argue, oh, this person didn't do their cultural homework, blah blah blah. That it's anachronistic, but it's also like a fucking piece of art. Just maybe that term is loaded for Hercules, but like.
For Disney in general.
Yeah, but like I mean, sometimes you have to tell the story. There's an urgency there.
Exactly.
There's. I think that gets. Oh boy, canon. Andrew, you and I talked about this before. Canon nerds, that's a big thing.
Yeah.
So I got a chaos question because we are kind of running down a little bit on time, but I do got a chaos question for y'all. And especially as again, content creators, I think this is a good question for you guys. Lot of people nowadays, because you have this repository that is youtube.com, if you're interested in something, it's very easy to look up that thing. Like, it's very easy to be like, oh, I hear Xenogears is good. Let me YouTube it. Let me YouTube a synopsis. And then falling down this rabbit hole of watching all 4 hours of your Xenogears video and being like, yes, I understand Xenogears now. So it's almost a devil's advocate question. I don't know. Do you think that analysis or discourse changes if you yourself have not played an RPG?
What do you mean by, like, does it change? Extrapolate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So I get you. You're deflecting, so you don't have to. No, okay.
Yeah, I'm out of here.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, does it like do you lose authority? For example, do you have to play something to be able to partake in discourse or analysis of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I feel like instinctively that it's like the elitist answer, but like, yeah, I think that, like, if you were actively trying to engage about something, especially a finer point of a game, like, I haven't played The Last of Us 2, but I'm not really interested in talking about it because I haven't played it. I know the twists. It sounds like the twist is shitty and makes you feel bad. But I don't have the full context of the experience of having played that game, and like, there is immense value in having that to be able to actually talk about these things. So I think that it's one thing to talk about, like, if you feel like a publisher is being chintzy about like DLC or something. But it's another thing altogether to kind of like, one thing about a character from an RPG and you think, oh, that game's a piece of shit because this doesn't make sense that the character acts like this. And it's like, you really do need the full context of having played a game because it's such a multi-sensory experience compared to like anything else, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, again, the example I always give is you don't need to play Superman 64 to know it's a piece of shit, right? But
Sure,
like,
yeah.
there's a certain experience that only comes, or there's a certain perspective that only comes from experience.
I don't need that person telling me why Superman 64 is a piece of shit.
Yeah,
I believe that there's accuracy in that opinion, but like, at the same time, it's like, if I actually like want to understand why it's a piece of shit, there's probably somebody much more qualified to answer that question.
Such a good answer to that. Yes, I agree. And Shell did in the chat here. She did say the perfect answer to this question is that if you've not played a game, well, I guess you simplified the question, but to me, it's the answer. If you have not played the game, maybe don't jump into like the Looney Tunes dust cloud of discourse about it, right?
Yeah.
So
For sure.
Andrew, how about you, man? I'm sure you have You have
I
an opinion of
think
this?
I think it depends. If it's a matter of talking about the game holistically, then yeah, you absolutely need to have played it and experienced it in order to be able to wade into that cesspool. Um, but when discussing like aspects of a story of a game's story or characters, I don't think you need to have necessarily played the game. You need to like find a way to see the relevant parts of it. Like I'm going to use Final Fantasy 13 as an example, even though I haven't played it. Go figure. Um, Lightning is a divisive character. There are people who love Lightning. There are people that hate Lightning. I think you can have an opinion on Lightning without having played the game at all, just by watching all the cutscenes that feature her and cutscenes that uh, feature characters talking about her uh, to get so you can get a firm idea of who that character is. And Lightning is the protagonist of 13. I think it's fair to say that she's on all the marketing, and I think she's the most prominent one. I'm talking about like just 13,
Mhm.
not 13
Yeah,
2,
yeah, yeah.
or obviously Lightning Returns.
I think there is something to be said for watching somebody play an entire game or watching a very story heavy game, all of the cutscenes. I do think there is like validity in that too, being able to
Ex-
contribute.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
totally, totally. Yeah, I didn't mean to, and that's the thing too, is that like video games now are so fucking ubiquitous. There's so many, and like it's impossible to play every game ever. Like my girlfriend played Eastward, right? I'll play Eastward one day, I'm sure, but like I pretty much lived vicariously through that experience, watching her play it, helping her figure stuff out on stream, etc., etc. I'm not gonna say I played Eastward to people. I'm not gonna be like, well, I had a lot of trouble. This part was easy. That game was easy. I don't know what you're talking about. That stuff sucks. But I don't think there's anything wrong with necessarily, experiencing a game through the lens of somebody else, as long as you keep your discourse and discussion around that, around that
Yeah.
context.
There
Yeah.
is something tactile that you will just be missing. There's not really it's not very easy to boil it down into like constituent parts, but there's something about the act of having played a game that does change your perception on it to some
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like I would say that playing Final Fantasy VII, playing as Cloud, gives you a very different perspective than just watching someone else play it, simply because of the nature of Cloud's character and
Yeah.
and his arc. Um, and brought up in the chat that there's a perception that
Yeah,
Squall
yeah.
is
I
a
was
very
gonna
different
be,
character
yeah,
than he actually
nice.
is. Like I agree. Like I can rag on 8, but I really like Squall as a
Dude,
character. I think
he's pragmatic. He's not emotional. Well, he is,
it's
but
it's
not about
it's
practice.
it's
Is
not
that do people
just
hate Squall? Is that a thing?
there are a lot of people that hate
Yeah,
Squall. There are a lot of people that love Squall.
he's so icky.
I think he is a fascinating, phenomenally grounded character.
Yes.
Incredibly grounded and and relatable because like especially if you played the game as a teenager, which I certainly fucking did. I'm 27.
I did.
Um
Well, I was a preteen actually.
I mean, hey,
Extra
you were
edgy.
hey, that's still good age to play it then. Like when you're that age, you are constantly inside your own head.
Yeah, Square Enix groomed me with that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
just like Squall. Squall is inside his own head, and as the player, you're very privy to his inner thoughts. And so you can see how his mind's working, where his mind is going. You can see why he acts the way he does. And of course, the localization for Final Fantasy VIII can be a bit spotty with the regular use of the ellipses, whatever. And
Mm.
I understand why the localization for that was kind of fucked by Square not giving the localization team the script, and they had to use a Game Shark to extract all of it. Um, but that's beside the point. Squall, if you just look at like highlights of Final Fantasy VIII, then Squall isn't that interesting. But if you accompany him throughout his journey, he is one of the strongest like Final Fantasy protagonists. Not in like terms of like physical strength, who would win Cloud, Squall, Tidus, or Shinato, or whatever her name is from
Oh,
11.
Shintoto. Mhm.
Shintoto. But in terms of how well rounded is he as a character? How compelling is he? How dynamic is
right. And sometimes you just don't get that experience unless you play it yourself, and also kind of are able to, the whole game is putting you in his shoes. So, so Shell says, I have never played Yakuza beyond like an hour of Yakuza 0. So she says Squall is the OG Kazuma Kiryu. Is that a Yakuza reference? I think so. I know Kiryu.
Yeah, I can neither confirm or deny that comparison because like I played about halfway through Final Fantasy VIII a while ago, so my experience is pretty limited. But like, yeah, I mean, like Kiryu is he's sort of he's very brooding. He's very stoic. He's very quiet. The game's kind of put him in these awkward positions where he's like forced to show his humanity in like funny ways. Um, but he's sort of like on the surface level, he's sort of like the typical like portrait of masculinity, I would say. But yeah, I mean, based on whatever, then there is some similarities. I would say Kiryu probably is a little bit more. He's a man of action. I don't know if that describes Squall.
It sounds like a bit of a cross, but it sounds like 80% Squall, 20% Cloud.
I see that a little bit. Yeah,
fair enough.
Cloud's a soft boy, like inside.
Yeah,
and Squall's
Cloud
only
is a
like,
goofball.
Yeah.
Cloud is a freaking goofball.
But yeah, so we are kind of running a little bit at time here. I do want to bring up one quick little theme here before we wrap up and do our closing show stuff, and it's, you guys actually both very much hinted on this during some of our discussions here, but with long form analysis and that kind of like analytical content creation becoming more of a thing, I think you're already seeing mainstream outlets try to employ it. I think, the best example of it mainstream I can think of is Tim Rogers and Kotaku kind of initially letting him do that kind of stuff. And I think you're going to see in the next, mark my words, for this podcast for posterity. That's what Cerulean Skies is. But I think you're going to see in like 5 years, IGN try to do a Milkjular-esque Xenogears video, right?
Oh man, perish the thought.
Yeah, what's the dude who did the Castlevania retrospective? I played a video game.
Finished a video game.
Yeah, that was so good. But like stuff like that too. That's gonna be. I feel like that mainstream outlets are gonna start to do this, and then you're gonna see a sort of like watering down of a lot of these concepts. So I'm wondering if this does happen, how do you think that will affect RPG perspective moving forward?
That is a good question.
Sorry, it's really broad.
I think really where I'm kind of stuck on is the premise that this long form content will be co-opted and utilized by larger, more corporate mainstream outlets, which I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Mm-hmm. But because of the amount of time it takes to do them, and because of the relatively limited number of games that the audiences those outlets have cultivated would be interested in seeing that kind of content from, I don't think it's as likely as you might think that they might do. They'll experiment with it. They'll be like, so there'll be an IGN long form analysis of Final Fantasy VII to test the waters, which is misguided because of just how Final Fantasy VII is a dead horse. Let's be real.
It's been Milkjular.
It has been Milkjular.
I'm so sorry, dude. I'm so sorry.
God, I love it.
Yeah, they'll do it with like the usual suspects because they want to test. They would want to test the waters with something they think is a sure thing, but those sure things have already been talked about to death. Final Fantasy VII, maybe Chrono Trigger, Halo Combat Evolved, maybe as like a shooter, or I'm blanking. Like maybe like a Gran Turismo or something, if you can like even begin to fathom a deep dive into Gran Turismo like that. Mm-hmm. and of course, you need the manpower for that. You need to have all these things. You need to have all these wheels turning. You need to have deadlines and such. And the thing with this kind of thing is the people that are most passionate about it, and I'm not I don't want to like necessarily include myself in this. You can include me in this if you want. People that are most passionate about it, who are taking their time to make sure that the video is as polished and as comprehensive as it can possibly be, while maintaining a good sense of pace, while not repeating itself, while being coherent. It takes a lot of time, and you're going to go through multiple drafts of a script. Things are going to get moved around. Things are going to be discovered during later processes and have to be re-edited in a way that feels natural. These are not the kinds of videos that are put together in a few days, like IGN reviews. Like, for example, they're 5-minute reviews. And these outlets' bread and butter is not looking backwards. It is staying in the here and the now and looking like 5 minutes into the future. That's where the money is. That is where the bulk of the audience is there for. They're there to see, is Elden Ring 2 Electric Boogaloo any good? They're not here to see, oh, I want to see IGN editor number 247B's take on The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I'm going to sit here for 3 hours and listen.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
Majuular, how about you? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I tend to agree that the real like long form stuff, even though it's like there are Joseph Anderson, and there are channels where like it really like has popped off in a big way, that still like represents a pretty niche slice of the market. I think there's always going to be a need for people who could convey ideas in a very quick, snappy way for people who actually like are interested in just knowing the very surface level of stuff. But like at the same time, I do agree that like the IGN format for doing game reviews probably is reaching a point where most people see it as obsolete in certain cases. Um, I think of a happy medium being something like ACG, if you guys are familiar.
Mm-mm.
But he's a YouTube channel. It's a big YouTube channel. I'm sure he's eclipsed 1 million subscribers, but it has the same kind of like, he's able to review new games and popular games, and he's able to do it relatively quickly. But he also does things. It's higher quality. He does deeper dives. His videos tend to be between like 20 minutes and half an hour, which is actually for the average consumer, that's like a great length of time to learn about a video game without like really kind of spoiling it for yourself. Yeah, it's just a matter of like covering things in a way that's like more than cursory, but still leaves things to the imagination type of thing.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I saw most major news outlets like IGN's reviews now they're already a little bit more kind of like free form. They don't like break things down into graphics and gameplay now. They'll kind of have like themed segments where they'll talk about like characters instead of just story and stuff like that. And I'm sure that will continue, but yeah, I don't know if they would really branch into the long form content. And as for your question about how that would affect the perception of RPGs, um, I mean, I think it's one of those things where like if you're gonna do that style of video, RPGs is probably the best one to do because it's made up of so many like things in it that it's
So many
difficult
moving
to,
parts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
for sure. It's difficult to know what an RPG is just having it explained to you sub 10 minutes. So,
Hmm.
but so, yeah, I don't know. RPGs, I think, are kind of fated to never like grow beyond a certain level
Hmm.
of like the gaming audience, just by virtue of the fact that it requires like more of an investment that a lot of people aren't interested in making when it comes to just relaxing after work and playing video games.
Right. I
Yeah,
mean, the
that
exception is like obviously Pokemon, right? Like
yeah,
Oh,
stuff
of
like
course,
that. But yeah,
yeah,
I
that
think
that
that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
that and there's at least with like classic and JRPGs, there's the aversion to turn-based combat because they
right.
just can't wrap their heads around abstraction. Like, I have a friend who wanted to buy the Final Fantasy VII remake, and I told him like, dude, just play the original. Just play the original. He's like, the graphics look like shit, and I hate turn-based combat. and that's just the only response. It's like, man, you're missing out.
And that's going to
Yeah.
be most people, I'd say, still.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's unfortunate, but that's just the world we live in.
And also on the other end of that spectrum are people who like think turn-based is just the way, because it, you know, a lot of developers in the 80s even only did it because that was just the only style that was like practically
Feasible.
possible. Yeah. And it's like you know, it's like saying all movies should be in black and white, right? Like it's the stupidest thing. You know, it's like as technology advances, you know, things change. It doesn't mean that like a movie can't come out now and be in black and white and be the best black and white movie ever made, right? That's not saying that. But like, yeah, I mean, there's always people who prescribe too much to one kind of thing, I think, end up really hurting yourself. And I think that's kind of the thesis of everything we've said tonight, is the idea of like trying to break down our prescriptivism, right? And trying to challenge our own thoughts and how we analyze things and how that does affect our perceptions. So I think this was a lot of fun, and I really appreciate both of you guys coming on here. I'm sorry if we're cutting you guys off a little bit, but yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate y'all sticking through all the fucking technical issues that I knew it was gonna happen.
At least it happened early.
It's true, yeah, that's true. But I had a lot of fun. Thank you guys again. Let's do some plugs. Andrew, we'll start with you. Where can we find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Lord Drewby. It's the same. It's spelled the same as it is in the title of this stream or VOD if you're watching the VOD. You can also find me on YouTube at youtube.com/Andrew Bluette. That is blue with 2 T's on the end. That's where you'll find my videos. I also have a Patreon, and you can find that through my YouTube channel. If you want to toss a buck or two my way, you'll get access to behind the scenes info and posts, and you'll be helping me to make my content.
Hell yeah, you get to make his content. Look at that. You make him. That's awesome.
Yeah, your name will be on the patron eye catch of every video.
Hell yeah. Everyone likes to see their name. Yeah. Majuular, how about you? Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at youtube.com/Majuular. You can also find me at twitter.com/Majuular. I occasionally engage in some light shit posting. Yeah, I don't know. If you like the cut of my jib, you can come listen to me wax nonsense on RPGs on my channel.
I'm definitely gonna listen to you wax off about RPGs on your channel.
And speaking of waxing off, that's exactly
I wanted to say
what
wax. I wanted to say wax lyrically, but that's not what you said.
It worked out better this way.
Yeah,
personally.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you guys.
I'm gonna whack you off, okay?
No, well, you know that's for the Patreon.
Let's go. I'm flexible. Let's go 96.
You know how hard it is to get to Florida from where I am?
Do you know how hard I am about the idea of you getting to Florida?
I can't even imagine.
I
really can't.
Anyway, thank you guys for the chaos. Thanks, chat, for hanging around. I'm gonna. My friend is playing Red Dead Redemption right now, so we're gonna shoot him a raid. His name is also Andrew. What a
there can
coincidence.
be only one.
What a coincidence. But yeah, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is usually when we do this RPG podcast. You can find all our stuff on YouTube, on Spotify, all the good links. Follow us on Twitter, twitter.com/HeroianSkyTM. And thanks again, y'all. We have Super RPG Friends tomorrow. We're continuing Final Fantasy VII, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you very much, and we will see you next week.
Cheers, everybody.
Bye.
He's the only person that was live right now. I'm like, I haven't even caught his stream in like a year and a half. But thank you guys. Sorry if I cut anyone off.
Not at all.
90 minutes went by very quick.
Yeah,
it was fun.
Yeah, it keeps going by fast whenever I'm on.
Yeah, it's the way it goes. I felt a little bumbling. I had a lot of really cool thoughts, and I was typing up some of the notes, and then they all were lost to me as soon as I hit that live
Yeah,
button.
I was looking over the doc when I got to work. I was in the break room. I couldn't actually like write down any notes. I'm just like, I know what I'm gonna say. I know it by heart. And I saw like under the examples for like social discourse under Sonic Frontiers, you had an example for Halo 2 being the best multiplayer. I'm just like, man, that hits. Because among my friend group that well, we all love Halo, I'm the only one who's like ride or die for Halo 2. And they're all just like, nah, fuck Halo. Jank as shit.
I don't
It's like
understand, dude, because they didn't play it. You know, like I don't think
well,
anyone.
one of them did, but he's just like, nah, man, Halo Combat evolved. Everyone, all the others, like they got started with Halo 3.